Tom had always been the kind of person who could sleep through anything. Seriously, anything. His friends used to joke that he could probably sleep through an earthquake and wake up wondering why his furniture had moved. His girlfriend Lisa knew this better than anyone. She had been living with him for about 8 months now, and every single morning was the same struggle. She would try to wake him up gently at first, calling his name softly and shaking his shoulder. Nothing. Then she would try pulling the blanket off him. He would just curl up tighter and keep snoring. She had even tried setting multiple alarms on his phone. But Tom had developed this incredible ability to turn them off in his sleep without even waking up. This particular Tuesday morning was different, though. Lisa had an extremely important meeting at work. Her boss had been talking about this presentation for weeks, and she absolutely could not be late. She had already showered, gotten dressed, and made breakfast. Everything was ready to go. Everything except Tom. He was still in bed, snoring away like he had all the time in the world. Lisa looked at the clock on the wall. 7:15. She needed to leave in 20 minutes, and Tom had his own important presentation at work that morning. She had promised him she would make sure he woke up on time because he had stayed up late preparing for it. Lisa tried everything she could think of. She opened the curtains to let the bright morning sunlight flood into the room. Tom just turned his face into the pillow. She called his name louder this time. No response. She even went to the kitchen and grabbed a wooden spoon and banged it against a pot a few times. Tom's eyelids flickered for a second, but then he was right back to sleeping. Lisa was starting to panic now. Time was running out for both of them. Then she had an idea. It was a bit crazy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She walked over to the bed and looked down at Tom, who was sleeping on his stomach with his face half buried in the pillow. She climbed onto the bed carefully, positioned herself, and sat down right on his back. Not too hard, but definitely firm enough to make an impact. She even bounced a little bit, hoping the sudden weight and movement would shock him awake. It worked. Boy, did it work. Tom's eyes flew open, and he let out a startled yell. His arms started flailing around wildly as his brain tried to figure out what was happening. He had gone from deep sleep to total confusion in half a second. In all the chaos of waking up so suddenly, his right arm swung out to the side with way more force than he intended. Lisa had been holding her coffee mug in one hand, sipping from it while she sat on him, thinking she was being clever. Tom's hand smacked right into that mug. Everything happened in slow motion and fast motion at the same time. The coffee mug went flying through the air, spinning and spilling hot coffee everywhere. Lisa tried to grab it but missed completely. The mug sailed across the bedroom and hit the wall with a loud crash. It shattered into what seemed like a million pieces, and coffee splattered all over the wall, the floor, and worst of all, Tom's laptop. His work laptop, the laptop that had his entire presentation saved on it. The laptop that was sitting on the nightstand plugged into the charger, completely defenseless against the wave of hot coffee that was now dripping down its screen and keyboard. Tom scrambled out of bed so fast he got tangled in the sheets and almost fell. Lisa jumped off him and stood there with her hands over her mouth, watching in horror as coffee dripped down the wall and pooled around the laptop. They both just stood there for a second, staring at the mess, neither of them quite believing what had just happened. The coffee was everywhere. It had even splattered onto the curtains and the lamp. Tom's mind was racing. His presentation, his laptop, the coffee, the broken mug. Everything was going wrong all at once. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning. How had it turned into this disaster so quickly? And he still was not even fully awake yet. His brain was trying to catch up with everything that was happening. Lisa finally spoke, her voice shaky. She apologized over and over, saying she had not meant for this to happen. She had just wanted to wake him up. She had not thought about the coffee mug. She had not thought about where his laptop was. Tom wanted to be upset. But when he looked at Lisa's face and saw how genuinely sorry she looked, he could not bring himself to yell at her. Besides, he knew he was the one with the sleeping problem. If he had just woken up when she first tried to wake him, none of this would have happened. They both stared at the coffee-covered laptop, and Tom felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. This morning was about to get a whole lot worse. Tom looked down at his feet, and that is when he noticed he was standing right in the middle of all the broken pieces of the coffee mug. Before he could move, he felt a sharp pain shoot through his left foot. He had stepped directly onto one of the larger shards of ceramic. He lifted his foot up quickly and saw blood starting to appear from a small cut right on the bottom of his foot. Great. Just great. As if this morning could not get any worse, he started hopping on his right foot toward the bathroom, trying not to put any weight on his left foot. Each hop left a small red spot on the carpet. Lisa saw what was happening and immediately felt even worse. She rushed after him, telling him to be careful and asking if he was okay. But in her hurry to help him, she did not see Tom's gym bag sitting right in the middle of the floor. He had left it there the night before, after coming home from the gym, too tired to put it away properly. Lisa's foot caught on the gym bag and she went tumbling forward. She tried to catch herself but ended up crashing into the dresser instead. The impact shook the whole piece of furniture. On top of the dresser was a tall glass of water that Tom had brought to bed the night before and never drank. The glass wobbled for a second. Seemed like it might stay upright, but then tipped over completely. Water poured out and cascaded right off the edge of the dresser, falling directly onto the chair where Tom had laid out his work clothes for the morning. His dress pants and his nice button-up shirt were now completely soaked. Tom watched this happen from the bathroom doorway, still holding his bleeding foot up off the ground. He could not believe it. Those were literally the only clean professional clothes he had left. He had been telling himself all week that he needed to do laundry, but he kept putting it off. Now, he was paying the price for his procrastination. Lisa picked herself up from the floor, checking to make sure she was not hurt. She looked at the soaked clothes, and then at Tom, who was still hopping on one foot. They made eye contact for a moment, and the situation was so ridiculous that they almost wanted to laugh, but there was no time for laughing. They both knew they were in serious trouble now. Tom hopped into the bathroom and sat down on the edge of the bathtub. He grabbed some toilet paper and pressed it against the cut on his foot. It was not a deep cut, but it was bleeding enough to be annoying. Lisa came in with the first aid kit from under the sink. She helped him clean the cut and put a bandage on it. While she was doing that, Tom's mind was racing through everything that had gone wrong and everything that still needed to happen. He had a presentation at 9 in the morning. It was now 7:30. His laptop was covered in coffee and probably dead. His work clothes were soaking wet. His foot was cut, and he still had not even brushed his teeth or had breakfast yet. How was he going to pull this off? He looked at Lisa, who seemed to be thinking the same thing. Her meeting was at 8:30, which meant she needed to leave in about 15 minutes. But she could not just leave him to deal with all this alone. She felt responsible since it was her wake-up method that had started this whole chain of disasters. They both stood up and went back to the bedroom to assess the damage. The coffee was still dripping down the wall. Broken mug pieces were scattered everywhere. The carpet had blood spots leading to the bathroom. Tom's clothes were dripping water onto the floor. And the laptop, the most important thing in all of this, was sitting in a puddle of coffee. Tom picked it up carefully, wiping the coffee off the outside with his shirt. He pressed the power button and held his breath. The laptop made a strange flickering sound. The screen lit up for half a second, showed some weird lines and colors, then went completely black. Tom pressed the power button again. Nothing. He tried holding it down, still nothing. The laptop was dead, completely dead, and his entire presentation was on it. Weeks of work, all the research he had done, all the slides he had carefully designed, everything was on that laptop. He had meant to back it up to the cloud. He had even thought about it yesterday, but he had been too tired after finishing the presentation and told himself he would do it in the morning. Tom sat down on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. Lisa sat down next to him and put her arm around his shoulders. She kept apologizing, but Tom told her it was not entirely her fault. He should have backed up his files. He should have not left his laptop so close to the edge of the nightstand. He should have done his laundry. He should have put his gym bag away. There were a lot of things he should have done differently. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was figuring out how to fix this situation in the next hour. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Tom's brain finally kicked into gear. Panic mode activated. He jumped up from the bed and started pacing back and forth, trying to think. Lisa looked at the clock and realized she was going to be late for her own meeting if she did not leave soon. But there was no way she could leave Tom to deal with this mess alone. Not when it was partly her fault. She made a quick decision and pulled out her phone to text her boss, saying she might be a few minutes late due to an emergency at home. First things first, they needed to try to save the laptop. Lisa grabbed a roll of paper towels from the kitchen and came back. She started carefully dabbing at the coffee, trying to soak up as much as possible. Tom found a small screwdriver and tried to open the back panel of the laptop to see if he could dry out the inside. But the screws were so tiny, and he was shaking so much from stress that he could not get them out. After a few minutes of trying, they both realized it was hopeless. The laptop was gone. There was no bringing it back. Tom's next thought was that he could use Lisa's laptop to quickly remake his presentation. He would not have all the details and fancy graphics he had spent so long creating, but at least he could remember the main points and throw together something basic. Lisa immediately opened her laptop and handed it to him. Tom sat down at the small desk in the corner of the bedroom and opened up the presentation software. His hands were flying across the keyboard as he tried to remember everything he had worked on. But then he hit another problem. He needed to access his work email to get some reference materials and data he had used in the original presentation. He clicked on the email icon and realized he was not logged in on Lisa's laptop. He tried to type in his email address and password, but his mind was so scattered from all the stress that he could not remember his password. He tried one combination. Wrong. He tried another one. Wrong again. He tried a third time, mixing up two passwords he used for different accounts. Wrong again. And then the email system locked him out for security reasons. Tom let out a frustrated groan and rubbed his face with his hands. Lisa came over and looked at the screen. She suggested he try the password reset option, but that would send a code to his phone or backup email, and they did not have time to wait for all that. Then Lisa had an idea. She had a friend who worked in IT and was really good with this kind of stuff. She grabbed her phone and called him, even though it was only 7:45 in the morning. Her friend answered on the fourth ring, his voice groggy and confused. Lisa quickly explained the situation, talking fast and apologizing for calling so early. Her friend, still half asleep, started walking her through some options. He told her how to access the password reset feature and speed up the process. Tom followed the instructions, clicking through different screens and entering information. Finally, after what felt like forever but was really only about 5 minutes, he got back into his email account. While Tom was working on the presentation, Lisa remembered the wet clothes. They needed to dry those somehow. She scooped up the soaking wet dress pants and shirt from the chair and carried them to the small laundry room. The apartment did not have a separate washer and dryer, just one of those combination units. Lisa threw the clothes in and turned the dryer on the highest heat setting. She knew that was not the best idea for dress clothes, but there was no time to be careful. They needed those clothes dry in the next 20 minutes, or Tom would have nothing to wear. She went back to the bedroom where Tom was frantically typing away, trying to recreate his presentation from memory. He was putting together slides as fast as he could, but they looked so basic compared to what he had originally made. No fancy charts, no professional graphics, just plain text and a few bullet points. It was not great, but it would have to do. Lisa started cleaning up the coffee and broken mug pieces from the floor, being careful not to cut herself. She found a broom and dustpan and swept up all the ceramic shards. The clock kept ticking. 8 o'clock. 8:10. 8:15. Tom was still working on the presentation, sweat forming on his forehead. He had about half of it done, but his original presentation had been 20 slides, and he was only on slide 9. Lisa checked the dryer. The clothes were still pretty damp. She left them in and went back to help Tom. She sat next to him and asked him what his presentation was about. As he explained it to her, she started making suggestions for what to include on each slide. Having someone to talk through it with actually helped Tom remember more details. 8:25. Tom finished the last slide. It was rough, really rough. But it covered all the main points he needed to make. He saved the file 3 times just to be absolutely sure. Lisa ran to check the dryer again. She pulled out the clothes and felt them. They were dry. Thank goodness. But when she held up the dress shirt, her heart sank. The high heat had shrunk it. The shirt that used to fit Tom perfectly now looked like it was made for someone much smaller. The sleeves were too short and the whole thing looked tight. The pants were not as bad, but they were definitely shorter than before, hitting a bit above where they should. Lisa brought the clothes to Tom. He looked at them and his shoulders slumped. This day just kept getting worse and worse. But he had no other option. He started getting dressed, pulling on the shrunken shirt. It was tight across his chest and shoulders, and the buttons were straining. He tried to button it all the way up, and when he got to the 3rd button from the top, it popped right off. The button went flying across the room and disappeared somewhere under the bed. There was no time to look for it. Tom's presentation started in 30 minutes and he still needed to get to the office. Tom stood in front of the mirror and looked at himself. The shirt was way too tight, and now it had a missing button right in the middle, where everyone would notice. The pants were too short, showing off his socks more than they should. He had a bandage on his foot that was visible through his dress shoe. His hair was a mess because he had not had time to style it properly. He looked absolutely ridiculous. There was no way he could go to work looking like this. His boss and all the senior managers would be in that presentation. He would look completely unprofessional. Lisa could see the panic in Tom's eyes. She started looking through her closet, trying to find something that might help. Then she spotted one of her oversized blazers. She had bought it a few months ago during a sale, going for that relaxed, boyfriend-style look that was trendy. It was pretty big on her, which meant it might actually fit Tom. She pulled it out and handed it to him. Tom looked at it skeptically. It was clearly a women's blazer, with a slightly different cut than a men's jacket. But at this point, what choice did he have? He put it on. Surprisingly, it did not look terrible. The blazer was loose enough to hide the too tight shirt and the missing button. Sure, if someone looked closely, they might notice it was a bit feminine in style, but from a distance it just looked like a casual blazer. Tom adjusted the collar and looked in the mirror again. It was not great, but it was better than before. At least the blazer covered most of the disasters happening underneath. Lisa told him he looked fine, though she was definitely exaggerating to make him feel better. The clock now showed 8:40. Tom needed to leave in about 5 minutes if he wanted to make it to the office by 9. Lisa quickly made him a breakfast sandwich while he saved his presentation to a flash drive, emailed it to himself as backup, and grabbed his bag. She threw together some eggs, cheese, and a bit of ketchup between 2 pieces of toast. It was not fancy, but it would give him some energy. Tom was stuffing papers and his phone charger into his bag when Lisa came back with the sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. Tom was standing near the bedroom door, still making sure he had everything he needed. Lisa handed him the sandwich, and he took it, grateful that at least something was going right. He was so hungry and stressed that he immediately took a huge bite of the sandwich while standing there. That is when Lisa realized she had forgotten her own bag in the bedroom. She quickly turned around and walked back toward the closet, not seeing that Tom was right behind her. She bumped into him from behind, not hard, but enough to startle him. Tom had just taken that massive bite of sandwich and had not swallowed yet. The bump made him lose his grip, and the entire sandwich fell forward out of his hands. He tried to catch it, but his reflexes were too slow. The sandwich fell directly down the front of the blazer he was wearing. The borrowed blazer. Lisa's blazer. Egg, melted cheese, and ketchup smeared all down the front in a long, messy streak. They both just stood there, frozen, staring at the mess. Tom's mouth was still full of sandwich. Lisa's eyes were wide. Neither of them could believe that something else had gone wrong. It was like the universe had decided to see just how much could go wrong in one morning. Tom finally swallowed his bite of food and looked down at the ruined blazer. The ketchup had made a particularly bright red stain that stood out against the dark fabric. Lisa grabbed a wet cloth from the bathroom and started trying to clean the stain. But wet fabric and ketchup do not mix well. Instead of removing the stain, she just spread it around more and made it look even worse. The blazer now had a big, wet, reddish-brown stain all down the front. Tom took off the blazer and looked at it. There was no fixing this. He could not wear it like this, but he also could not wear the shirt with the missing button. He was completely out of options. He put the stained blazer back on anyway. What else could he do? Show up in a too small shirt with a missing button? Or show up in a blazer with a food stain? Both options were terrible. He chose the blazer because at least it covered more of the disaster. Tom looked at Lisa, and Lisa looked at Tom. And then, despite everything, despite all the chaos and stress and disasters, they both started laughing. Not just a little chuckle, but real, genuine laughter. The kind that makes your stomach hurt and tears come to your eyes. It was all so ridiculous. The coffee, the broken mug, the cut foot, the wet clothes, the shrunk shirt, the missing button, the stained blazer. Everything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong. It was like a comedy movie. Except it was their real life. They laughed for about 30 seconds. And in that moment, all the stress and panic just melted away. Sure, everything was still a disaster, but at least they could laugh about it together. Tom wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. He checked his phone. 8:50. He was definitely going to be late. There was no avoiding it now. He grabbed his bag, gave Lisa a quick kiss, and headed for the door. Lisa called after him, telling him good luck and that he would do great. Tom stepped out of the apartment building and into the bright morning sun, wearing 2 short pants, a stained blazer, and a bandage on his foot, carrying a flash drive with a hastily made presentation. He had 15 minutes to get to his office for the most important presentation of his career. This was going to be interesting. Tom practically ran to his car, his bandaged foot protesting with every step. The morning traffic was, of course, terrible. Every red light seemed to take twice as long as normal. Every driver in front of him seemed to be going exactly 5 miles under the speed limit. He kept checking the clock on his dashboard. 8:55. 8:58. 9 o'clock. He was officially late. His presentation was supposed to start right now, and he was still 10 minutes away from the office. He finally pulled into the parking lot at 9:12. He parked badly, taking up more space than he should have. But he did not care. He grabbed his bag and ran toward the building, his foot hurting with each step. He probably looked crazy, running in his 2 short pants and stained blazer, but there was no time to worry about appearances anymore. He burst through the front door of the office and headed straight for the conference room. When he opened the conference room door, everyone turned to look at him. His boss, Mr. Peterson, was standing at the front of the room. 3 senior managers were sitting around the table. 2 colleagues who were supposed to present after him were there too. Everyone was staring at Tom, taking in his disheveled appearance, his messy hair, his 2 short pants, his stained blazer, his slightly wild eyes. There was a moment of complete silence. Mr. Peterson looked at Tom with a mixture of concern and confusion. He asked Tom if everything was all right. Tom stood there, breathing hard from running, and realized he had a choice. He could make up some excuse, try to play it cool, and act like nothing was wrong, or he could just tell the truth. And honestly, after the morning he had just been through, he was too tired to make up a story. So Tom told them everything. He started from the beginning, explaining how his girlfriend had sat on him to wake him up because he was such a heavy sleeper. He told them about the flying coffee mug and how it had destroyed his laptop with his entire presentation on it. He explained about stepping on the broken mug and cutting his foot. He described the water spilling on his only clean clothes and how he had to put them in the dryer on high heat, which shrunk everything. He mentioned the missing button and the borrowed blazer. And he finished with the breakfast sandwich incident that had created the stain everyone was currently staring at. As Tom told the story, something unexpected happened. Mr. Peterson started smiling. Then he started chuckling. By the time Tom got to the part about the sandwich falling down the blazer, Mr. Peterson's down the part about the sandwich falling down the blazer, Peterson was laughing out loud. A real, genuine laugh. The other people in the room started laughing too. Not in a mean way, but in a sympathetic, we have all been there kind of way. Tom found himself laughing along with them, finally able to see just how absurd his entire morning had been. Mr. Peterson told Tom to sit down and catch his breath. He then shared his own story about a time, years ago, when his wife had tried to wake him up by dumping a bucket of cold water on him. He had jumped up so fast that he slipped and fell, breaking his nose on the nightstand. He had to go to an important client meeting with 2 black eyes and a bandaged nose. Everyone laughed at that story too. Suddenly, Tom did not feel so alone in his disaster. Mr. Peterson suggested they take a 15-minute break. He told Tom to use that time to compose himself and get his presentation ready. He also sent one of Tom's colleagues to the gym locker room, where apparently several people kept spare clothes for after-work workouts. The colleague came back with a clean button-up shirt and a decent pair of pants. They were not a perfect fit, but they were so much better than what Tom was wearing. Tom changed quickly in the bathroom, finally getting rid of the too tight shirt and the stained blazer. When the presentation resumed at 9:30, Tom felt like a different person. He was wearing clean clothes that fit. He had washed his face and combed his hair. He had taken a few deep breaths and calmed down. He plugged in his flash drive and opened his hastily made presentation. Yes, it was basic. Yes, it did not have all the fancy graphics and detailed charts he had originally created, but Tom discovered something interesting. Without all the flashy visuals to rely on, he had to focus more on his speaking and explaining. He found himself telling stories and using examples to illustrate his points. The presentation became more conversational and engaging. The senior managers actually seemed more interested in this version than they might have been in the overly polished version he had lost. They asked questions, he answered them, and there was real discussion happening. By the end of the 30-minute presentation, Tom felt good about how it had gone. Not perfect, but good. Real, human. Mr. Peterson thanked him and said they would follow up with feedback in a few days. Tom went back to his desk, exhausted but relieved. He texted Lisa to let her know how everything had gone. She had been worried all morning, wondering if he had made it on time and how his presentation had gone. She was so happy to hear that it had worked out. They texted back and forth for a few minutes, and Tom thanked her for helping him through the crisis. He also told her they really needed to work on better morning routines. That evening, after they had both finished work, Tom and Lisa met up at home. The bedroom was clean now, with fresh sheets on the bed and no signs of the morning's chaos except for a small coffee stain still visible on the wall that they had not quite been able to scrub off completely. They ordered takeout for dinner and sat on the couch, talking about their crazy day. Tom told Lisa about how his boss had laughed and shared his own story. Lisa told Tom about how she had spent her whole meeting distracted, worrying about him. They both agreed that this morning, as terrible as it had been, would make a great story to tell at parties. They could already imagine telling their friends years from now about the time a simple wake-up call turned into complete chaos. Before going to bed, Tom did a few things. First, he set up 3 different alarm clocks around the bedroom, all set to different sounds and times, making it nearly impossible to sleep through them. Second, he backed up all his important work files to the cloud, something he promised himself he would never forget to do again. Third, he finally did the laundry that he had been putting off all week. And fourth, he and Lisa established a new house rule: no coffee allowed in the bedroom. Ever. They would drink coffee in the kitchen from now on, where it could not destroy laptops or ruin mornings. As they got ready for bed that night, Tom looked at Lisa and smiled. The morning had been a complete disaster. Probably one of the worst mornings of his life. But they had survived it together. They had laughed through it. They had figured it out, and somehow, going through that chaos had made them feel closer. They had seen each other at their most stressed and panicked, and they had not fallen apart. They had worked together, supported each other, and made it through. Tom set all 3 of his new alarm clocks, making absolutely sure they were on and set for the right time. Lisa laughed at how paranoid he was being about it. But after this morning, could anyone blame him? They climbed into bed, both of them exhausted from their stressful day. As Tom closed his eyes, he thought about how sometimes the worst days make the best stories. And sometimes, when everything goes wrong, that is when you learn what really matters. He had learned that backing up files is important, that doing laundry regularly is important, that putting your gym bag away is important, but most importantly, he had learned that having someone who can laugh with you through the chaos is the most important thing of all.